3 weeks ago, an apartment on the 94th floor of a tower on Billionaires Row sold for $22 million. The seller had paid $31.5 million for it in 2019. That is a loss of nearly $10 million on a single apartment in the middle of Manhattan, in a building that was supposed to be the safest store of wealth in America. And it is not the worst loss in the building. The owners here are stuck because the market turned. They are stuck because of what their own lawyers put in writing about the building they live in. The tower is 432 Park Avenue. It stands 1,396 feet over Midtown Manhattan. It opened in 2015, and for 5 years it was the tallest residential building in the world. You have seen it even if you do not know the name. It is the thin white column with the enormous square windows, the one that looks like a ruler standing on its end above Central Park. It cost roughly $1 billion to build. It is also the reason the phrase Billionaires Row entered normal conversation. It went up on the site of the old Drake Hotel, and after it, every developer in Manhattan wanted a pencil tower with a view of the park. So how does a building like this end up in court against the people who built it? The developer was Harry Macklowe, working with the Los Angeles investment firm CIM Group. The architect was Raphael Viñoly. In 1913, while the concrete was still going up, Macklowe told the New York Times it was the building of the 21st century. The pitch worked. Jennifer Lopez bought in. So did a Chinese energy executive. And in 2016, Saudi retail billionaire Fawaz Al-Hokair paid $87.7 million for the penthouse on the 96th floor, the highest apartment in New York City. That was $10,623 per square foot, and at the time, it was the fourth most expensive apartment sale in the history of the city. Hold that number. It is going to be worth a lot less by the end of this. And understand what people were actually paying for at that price. The view is genuine. What sold these apartments, though, was certainty. The premise of a super tall on Billionaires Row is that an apartment 1,000 feet above Central Park is the most durable place on earth to park money. Stocks move. Currencies move. A trophy apartment in Manhattan does not. Every owner in this building has now found out what happens when that premise fails, and the reason it failed has nothing to do with the New York property market. Because the thing that made this building extraordinary is the same thing that broke it. To get 1,396 feet of height on a small midtown lot, Viñoly designed the tower with a height-to-width ratio of 15:1. That puts the floor plate at roughly 93 feet across, about the length of a basketball court. A quarter-mile of tower standing on that. A structure that thin does not behave like a normal skyscraper. It moves. So the engineering compensates. Entire floors are left empty so wind can blow straight through the tower instead of pushing against it. Near the top, tuned mass dampers swing like pendulums against the sway. That part worked. The tower handles the wind exactly as designed. But slenderness does change what a building is allowed to get wrong. A thick, squat tower can absorb a sloppy tolerance. A structure 15 times taller than it is wide cannot, because everything gets amplified. A small movement at the base becomes a large movement at the top. Concrete that was poured a little wrong in 2013 is carrying the load of everything above it in 2026. The height was what they were selling, and it left the construction almost no margin for error. Then the residents moved in. The problem started about 2 years later. Water. According to the condo board's own complaint, the building has had more than 20 water leaks since 2017. One of them, in November 2018, is the one everybody in real estate remembers. A leak the board blamed on poor plumbing installation sent water into the elevator shafts. 2 of the building's 4 residential elevators went out of service for weeks. Water damaged 35 separate apartments. Think about what that means in practice. You paid tens of millions of dollars for an apartment on the 80th floor. Half the elevators are down. You are sharing the remaining 2 with the entire tower, and the elevators were already a problem because of the height. They are programmed to slow down when the building sways. which is a safety feature working exactly as designed. The complaint's argument is that the developers failed to account for how much a 15-to-1 tower would actually move, so a system meant to slow the cabs occasionally ends up stopping them instead. On windy days, residents reported being stuck in them for hours. Not minutes. Hours, hundreds of feet up, in a tower where the alternative is the emergency stairs. Then there is the noise. And this is the complaint that gets least sympathy from the outside and matters most from the inside. The filing describes walls that creak like the galley of a ship. It describes a trash chute that residents said sounds like a bomb going off when somebody upstairs uses it. It describes horrible and obtrusive noise and vibration as a standing condition of living there, not an occasional event. A tower this thin moves in a way you can hear without ever threatening the structure. On a windy night, the building talks, and the people who paid tens of millions of dollars to sleep up there are the ones listening to it. The single most damaging line in the entire case is not from a resident. According to the board's filing, the chairman of CIM Group, one of the developers, described the noise and vibration in the building as intolerable and said it made it difficult to sleep during periods of even moderately inclement weather. That is one of the men who built it. And then somebody nearly got killed. A worker sent in to deal with the water infiltration was drilling through concrete. According to the complaint, there were no accurate as-built drawings showing what was inside that concrete. The drill went into the building's electrical wiring and set off an arc flash explosion. The worker was thrown backward several feet. It was the second arc flash explosion in the building in 3 years. At this point, the owners still believe the developer would fix all of it. That belief is the thing that cost them the most money. By 2021, the condo board had hired an engineering consultant, SBI Consultants, to go through the building properly. What came back was a number that made the front page. More than 1,500 construction and design defects in the common areas alone, not inside the apartments. In the shared parts of the tower, the parts every owner is jointly responsible for paying to fix. The filing says many of those defects were described as life safety issues, and that they either did not conform to the construction documents or did not meet industry standards. On September 23, 2021, the board sued. The defendants were CIM Group, Maclo Properties, the entity the developers created to build and control the tower, and 7 employees of the developers who had been sitting on the condo board itself. Read that last part again, because it explains why this took until 2021. In New York, when a developer builds a condominium, the developer also controls the condo board. The sponsor entity runs it, and the sponsor keeps running it until most of the units have been sold off. That is standard practice across the industry, and it is written into how these buildings get created, which means that for years, the body legally responsible for identifying defects in 432 Park Avenue and forcing the developer to fix them was staffed by the developer's own employees. The people who would have to file the complaint were the people the complaint would be filed against. The leaks started in 2017. The board sued in 2021. That gap is not an accident of paperwork. The developers did not settle. They fought. The sponsor's public position was that 432 Park Avenue is Manhattan's premier residence and that the building has performed remarkably well. In its formal answer, it called the board's lawsuit ill-advised and described it as an effort to wrest unwarranted payments out of the developer. Maclo's position on the cracking in the concrete was that it is typical and to be expected with the materials used. So the case ground forward. By 2024, it had produced testimony from 28 witnesses and more than 4 million pages of documents, and it was still not resolved. Later reporting put the discovery at 7 million pages and roughly 100 days of depositions. Then, in late April 2025, the board filed a second lawsuit. And the second one is not about noise. The new complaint runs 46 pages, and it makes a much heavier accusation. It says the facade of the building is plagued with thousands of severe cracks, spalling, and other forms of deterioration. It says those cracks have let water into the structure, and it says the water has corroded the steel rebar inside the tower's reinforced concrete columns. It also describes a crack 10 inches deep in the building's core. The board is asking for $165 million in actual damages plus punitive damages. This time the board went wider. Alongside Maklo and CIM Group, it named the construction manager, the architect of record, and the engineering firm. Forget the money for a second. The word the complaint uses is fraud. And this is where the case stops being about maintenance. The board alleges that the developers knew about the cracking during design and construction between 2011 and 2015 and hid the extent of it from buyers and from city inspectors. It describes a deliberate and far-reaching fraud and says the developers ignored their own architects and engineers in order to avoid delays and maximize profits. One specific allegation stands out because it is small enough to picture. Engineers advised applying a thick elastomeric coating to the exterior concrete. It is a protective layer. It is the thing that stops water getting into cracks, and water getting into cracks is what corrodes the steel inside. According to the complaint, Maklo dismissed the recommendation. If that allegation is true, the entire facade problem in this building traces back to a coating decision made before anybody moved in, on a tower that had already sold apartments for tens of millions of dollars. CIM Group and SLCE. Architects say they vehemently deny the claims and are moving to have the complaint dismissed. WSP declined to comment. Maklo Properties has not commented publicly on the fraud allegations. Nothing has been proven in court. Both cases are still open. If you are getting something out of this, hit subscribe. I cover engineering failures and the dark side of luxury real estate every week. Now, the part where the owner's own rescue plan turned on them. That open status is doing more damage to these owners than any verdict could, and it is the part almost nobody covering this building has worked through. Because here is what happens when a condo board sues its own developer for fraud. The complaint becomes a public document. Reporters read it. Buyers read it. Buyers' attorneys read it, and then they read it out loud to their clients. Every fact you have heard so far came from filings the owners themselves put on the record. So an owner at 432 Park is now caught in something the sales brochure never contemplated. To force the developer to fix the building, the board had to describe the building's defects in the most damaging possible language, in public, permanently. That description is now the first thing any serious buyer finds. The board's own lawyers wrote the strongest argument against buying an apartment in the building. The legal analysis on this is blunt. A case review published by the New York firm Guzoff describes 432 Park as a cautionary tale for condo boards and states it directly. Public awareness of the lawsuit produced sluggish sales, and owners trying to sell were forced to lower their prices. And it goes further than sentiment. A buyer at this price level arrives with a real estate attorney whose job is to read the building's litigation and financials before anything gets signed. That attorney finds 2 active lawsuits, one of them alleging fraud, unresolved after 5 years. Then the same attorney has to work out who pays for the repairs if the board loses, because the answer is the owners. Through assessments, nobody can size yet. A buyer cannot price an unknown liability, so they either walk or they bid low enough that the unknown stops mattering. That is the entire explanation for the numbers that follow. Start at the top. Al Hokair, the man who paid $87.7 million for the highest apartment in New York City, has never spent a single night in it. He listed it in 2021 for $169 million, which would have been one of the largest residential sales in the history of the city. Nobody bought it. He cut the price to $130 million. Nobody bought it. In 2024, he cut it again to $105 million. That is a reduction of $64 million on one apartment, and it still has not sold. He bought it in 2016 and listed it in 2021. So he has now been trying to sell this apartment for as long as he held it off the market. He has cycled through some of the biggest brokerage names in New York luxury real estate, and none of them could move it. Then there is the detail that says the most about how this building was financed in the first place. CIM Group, one of the developers now being sued, lent Al Hokair $56 million toward that purchase. The developer financed nearly 2/3 of the buyer's price on the most expensive unit in its own tower. That is the apartment nobody will touch. Further down the tower, the losses are already final. Hedge fund manager Mitch Julis paid $59 million in 2016. He listed at $135 million in 2021 and eventually signed a contract at $92 million. Unit 84A sold for $21.38 million in 2016. It resold for $13.5 million. And Unit 94A, the sale from 3 weeks ago that opened this video, went for $22 million against a purchase of $31.5 million in 2019. It had been listed at $33 million in 2024. It closed at 30% off. For scale on how far that fell, Al Hokair's original $169 million ask would have set a New York City record. The actual record, $238 million, was set in 2019 by Ken Griffin at 220 Central Park South, a few blocks west. Al Hokair is now asking less than half of what Griffin paid. So where does this leave the people still living at 432 Park Avenue? They are 5 years into litigation with no resolution in sight, and both outcomes cost them. If the board wins, the money pays for repairs on a tower that will always carry this history. If the board loses, the owners pay for the repairs themselves through assessments, on top of what the apartments have already lost. And either way, the public record does not go away. There is one more detail, and it is the one residents mention most. The cracks in the facade have started producing a whistling sound in high winds, on a building that already sways. The hard engineering worked. The wind, the height, the view, all delivered exactly as designed. What broke this building was plumbing, concrete, elevators, and what the buyers were never told. The building is still standing, and it is not going anywhere. It was engineered for wind loads and seismic loads and a design life measured in centuries, and on that score it is doing fine. What it was not engineered for is a public court record. The apartments inside it lose value every time another one closes below what the last owner paid, and every closed sale becomes the comparable an appraiser uses on the next one. That is a mechanism that runs on its own, without any help from the market, and nothing in either lawsuit stops it. So the owners at 432 Park Avenue are holding the highest apartments in New York City in a tower that will outlast all of them, that they cannot fix without a verdict, cannot sell without a discount, and cannot explain to a buyer without handing over the documents that caused the discount. Next, the mega project that swallowed $500 billion and then stopped being built.